Morning. Welcome to the Mid-Maine Chamber of Commerce Business Breakfast Series. My name is Michelle Joller-Labby, VP of HR and Diversity for Thomas College and Chair of the Board of Mid-Maine Chamber of Commerce. It is my pleasure to welcome you here today. Before we begin our program this morning, I would like to take a moment to thank our 2024 Business Breakfast Series sponsors, AT&T, Cross Insurance, New Dimensions Federal Credit Union, Nicholson, Michoud and Nadeau, CPAs, O'Donnell Lee, PA, and Sheridan Construction. Morning Sentinel and Turner Publications, our print media sponsors. 107.9 The Mix, our radio sponsor. And Kennebec Savings Bank, our video sponsor. Please welcome our new chamber members. Anywhere's Event and Party Rentals, LLS. Messalonsky Trail Riders, ATV Club. Modern Woodman Fraternal Financial, and Select Energy. As a reminder, please turn off your cell phone in consideration of our guests, and please don't forget to complete the evaluation forms on your table before you leave today. We hope you were able to visit with today's breakfast spotlighter, E2 Tech, who is located in the back of the room. We invite you to attend our upcoming events. Our next business after hours will be held next Wednesday and hosted by Mbingo Mountain Coffee and Anywhere's LLC. It will be held under the tent at 7 Silvermont Street in Waterville from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Additional parking is available at the Notre Dame on Silver Street. Mark your calendars for our business-to-business showcase to be held on Tuesday, May 21st at Thomas College from noon to 6 p.m. Registration forms are available on our website, and booths are filling fast. For more information, contact Cindy, who's right there, at the Chamber. On Thursday, June 6th, we will host a leadership luncheon with Dr. Katie Spencer-White, President and CEO of the Mid-Maine Homeless Shelter. The luncheon will be held at Amici's Cucina from 11:30 to 1 p.m. Registration is open at www.midmainechamber.com. The Mid-Maine Chamber will hold our new member orientation and member refresher on Tuesday, June 11th from 11:30 to 1 in the Chamber boardroom. Lunch is included. Come see how your benefits can work for you. Please call or email jamie@midmainechamber.com to register. Mark your calendar to attend June's Business After Hours, which we held on June 12th, hosted at Quarry Road Recreation, 300 Quarry Road in Waterville. Gather your team members and practice your swings. The Mid-Maine Chamber Golf Classic will be held on Monday, June 17th at the Waterville Country Club. Registration forms will be available shortly, or email cindy@midmainechamber.com to reserve your spot. Save the date for the area's largest music and food festival. The Taste of Waterville will be coming to Hedda Falls Wednesday, June 31st. Enjoy delicious food from the food trucks. July 31st. Sorry about that. Apparently I need new glasses. Yes, the Taste of Waterville coming to the Hedda Falls on Wednesday, July 31st. Enjoy delicious food from area food trucks and restaurants, music throughout the day with a headliner concert in the evening, brew tasting, cornhole, and a dunk tank, and more. Our next business breakfast will be held on Thursday, September 12th, 2024, and entitled Walking the Tightrope, Finding the Balance of Personal Happiness and Passion for Your Job, with Community Health and Counseling Service Regional Manager Leslie Lenig. Breakfasts are held right here from 7:15 to 9 a.m. To register, email cindy@midmainechamber.com or call the Chamber office. Today's presentation is a discussion regarding electricity and what is driving the costs associated with delivery and available options. There will be time provided for Q&A following the presentation. And this morning's speaker will be introduced by Joy McKenna, Director of Marketing and Communications for Maine General Health and past chair of the board of the Mid-Maine Chamber of Commerce. Please remember when you're asking questions, please speak up So your questions will be captured on our video. Unfortunately, we don't have an extra mic to pass around today, so we just ask that you speak up when asking a question. And at this time, I will welcome Joy to the podium.
Alrighty. Good morning. Thank you for being here today. I'm honored to give the introduction to our speaker. William S. Harwood has served as Maine Public Advocate since he was appointed by Governor Mills in January 2022. Prior to his appointment, Harwood served as Senior Policy Advisor for Regulatory Affairs within the Governor's Energy Office. Before joining the Governor's Energy Office, Harwood served as Senior Counsel at Veraldina in Portland. Over his 4-decade legal career, he represented a wide range of entities, including utility customers, public utilities, renewable energy companies, technology companies, paper mills, and colleges and universities in matters before state and federal regulatory agencies. He is also an adjunct professor of law at the University of Maine School of Law, where he has taught utility regulation and administrative law. Harwood has also served on the governing boards of Hearthstone Incorporated, Katahdin Institute, Legal Services for the Elderly, the Jackson Laboratory, Yarmouth Historical Society, Waynfleet School, Maine Justice Foundation, and the Hurricane Island Foundation. He is a past recipient of the Muskie Access to Justice Award, the American Bar Association Pro Bono Public Award, and the Howard Dana Award for Outstanding Service for his work promoting free legal services to the poor. Harwood is a graduate of Harvard University and Fordham University Law School. He lives in Yarmouth, Maine with his wife Ellen and his 5 grown children. Please join me in welcoming William Harwood.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Joy, thank you for that kind introduction. It's great to be here with you this morning. And I want to first do a shout out to Eric and E2 Tech. They are here this morning and they are really great partners in the energy and environmental world. Much appreciated and valued by those of us in Augusta. I'm really impressed with this chamber. I've been sitting here hearing more and more about the services and programs that this chamber runs. You realize when most of us in Augusta spend our time with our head in our office and our eyes in our laptop, we forget how much good stuff is going on, and it's really impressive what this organization does for this community every year. And you are very lucky to be part of this organization, and you ought to be very proud of what they've accomplished. It's truly impressive. So, who am I and why am I here? I am the public advocate, and as I sometimes say, I'm here from the government to help, which of course is. But really I am. We are a small office, the Office of Public Advocate. We are probably one of the smallest departments in the state government. There's just 11 of us. And our job every day, we show up for work every day to represent the interests of utility ratepayers, utility consumers, and that's all of you. We spend the day trying to figure out how to make life better for energy consumers, and in particular, electricity consumers and ratepayers. We do that in our small office. We have 6 attorneys, a total of 11. We have a consumer advisor. If you have questions about your utility bill or utility service, she's terrific. She will spend as much time on the phone with you as you need and can get you the help that you need if you are facing a specific problem. We have a financial advisor who is great, who handles a lot of our analysis and financial work, and then of course we have our attorney advocates. We do most of our work before the Maine Public Utilities Commission. That's where when the utilities come in for a rate increase, when CMP proposes to increase its rates, we are there every step of the way, challenging, questioning, and objecting where appropriate to their proposed increase, all of which is trying to keep your electricity rates as affordable as possible. We do a lot of work in front of the Maine legislature. The Energy and Utilities Committee of the legislature handles a couple of hundred bills every year. many of which have a direct impact eventually on how much you pay in your CMP bill each month. And we are there representing you and the ratepayers of Maine, making sure that the legislators who are voting on those bills understand as best we can what the impact on consumers will be if they vote up or down on a particular bill. And spend a lot of time there. We also spend some time in Washington, D.C. at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission because, of course, not all of the rules and regulations that affect your electricity are done in Augusta. Some of them are done at the federal level, and we are there when needed to represent Maine ratepayers before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And finally, we're in the courts. Yesterday, we were in front of the Maine Supreme Court arguing a case as to how certain rates should be allocated among rate classes. So we're a very active office that is working hard to advocate for Maine ratepayers. So the topic today is, why are electricity rates so high? Why do they keep going up? And obviously, it's a complicated set of factors. Some of them are very small, but when you add those small factors up, they become big. Some of it is driven by the kind of factors that you all are struggling with your pricing. Basic inflation, basic supply chain issues. The utilities are no different. But they do have some unique areas and larger costs. And I'm going to touch on 3 of those today and give you just a flavor of some of the work that our office is doing on those 3 issues. And let me encourage you to interrupt and ask questions as I go along. I know all of you have a lot of experience, expertise, common sense when it comes to how CMP serves this community with electricity. I want to hear from you. I'd much rather have a discussion and a dialogue with you rather than spend the next 45 minutes up here just droning on and talking to you. So please raise your hand, interrupt. I'm happy to take questions. So what are the 3 areas that I'd like to talk with you about this morning? First is this strange program called net energy billing. Not many people know much about net energy billing. It's a little bit inside baseball, but it is a big issue in terms of the impact on your rates. And when you drive up and down the interstate and you see those solar panels at the exchanges, that's net energy billing. Net energy billing is a program designed to encourage and incentivize renewable energy, specifically solar. So we'll get into that. We'll also get into what we call the CEP problem. CEPs are competitive electricity providers. And we'll talk about, these are the people who supply the electricity. CMP delivers it. There are some real problems and issues in that supply and how the CEPs are behaving. And finally, the tragedy of climate change, and specifically what is going on with the increased storms. The frequency and severity of storms are causing real havoc for CMP in terms of what it costs to clean up after these storms, and that cost is getting bigger and bigger. So let's get started. The first, net energy billing. It came out of the legislature about 5 years ago in 2019. It was one of those programs that we are, and I'm sure you as businessmen see it all the time, folks, where with the best of intentions, the legislature thought they were doing the right thing, and unfortunately it has turned out to be a very, very expensive program. Essentially what they said was, if the developers will come to Maine and build smaller solar projects, they will grant them a generous subsidy. And we didn't know, the legislature didn't know how many of them would come. Well, it turned out they have come in droves, and you see it as you drive around the state, and we're still in the process of more and more being built. When the dust settles on this program in a year or 2, it is estimated that there will be more, the solar projects that are being developed will in total be bigger than the Maine Yankee nuclear power plant, be bigger than the Wyman 4 oil plant, be bigger than the Seabrook. They will be collectively the largest generating plant in New England. Now, they're spread all over the state, and these are these neighborhood community solar projects. But they're not, I want to be clear here, they're not the rooftop. They're not the panels that you see on a typical 4-bedroom suburban home. These are up to 5 megawatts. Now, 5 megawatts doesn't mean much to most of you, but a 5 megawatt solar farm is about 20 acres of panels. So this is not your backyard. This isn't your roof. It's not putting it on the barn. These are large commercial operations covering 20 acres. And the problem is, in round numbers, and the subsidies are complicated, the formula the legislature came up with, but in round numbers, where CMP is paying these solar developers approximately 20 cents a kilowatt hour, when the experts tell us that it costs less than 10 cents for them to build and operate these plants. Let me just say that again. We're paying, you are paying, I'm paying, we're all paying in our CMP bill 20 cents a kilowatt hour for the energy that they provide when it only costs them less than 10 cents. That's the problem of when a legislative committee with all the best of intentions is sitting around in Augusta late one afternoon trying to draft a bill. And this is what happens when they, with all the best of intentions, but with very limited time, very limited analysis, and very limited research, try and come up with the level of subsidy. To be blunt, the subsidy is larger than it should be, and it needs to be. And we are paying that cost. Our estimate is that when the dust settles and we have all of the final projects underway, the cost to Maine ratepayers will be approximately $220 million a year. That's $220 million a year. The program lasts for 20 years. So you can do the quick math. We're looking at a $4 billion. Now, some people have called it a $4 billion solar tax. That's a little strong for the language, but you get the idea. This is what is being done. And I want to be clear that the Office of Public Advocate, and I personally, and I'm sure all of you, we want renewable energy. We need to reduce our dependence on oil and gas and coal and the fossil fuels. We need more wind energy, we need more solar energy, but we can't afford to pay more than we need to. What we need to find is a way to have solar and wind energy that is the best cost. And if we need to subsidize it, as we are doing, we heavily subsidize it through our state and federal taxes, and as I've just described, we subsidize it through our electricity rates. The subsidies are there, but they shouldn't be any larger than they need to be. The subsidies should be measured just enough to make sure those wind and solar projects get built, but no larger, because the ratepayers can't afford it. And most importantly, we don't need to give them more in order to get it, in order to get the solar power. And what happens is when we raise the rates, we make the whole process of trying to avoid using fossil fuels to heat our homes, and we want to convert to heat pumps, to operate our vehicles, we want to convert to electric vehicles, but as we raise the price of electricity, we're heading into headwinds in terms of that. So we got to keep electricity prices affordable in order to make electricity a better option than gasoline and home heating fuel. And that's all part of this. So that is the real challenge. Now, the legislature adopted it in 2019. The legislature has looked at this and has so far declined to make any meaningful changes in the amount of the subsidy. They have made a little bit on the margin. The question is, should they go further and reduce that subsidy that's payable over the next 20 years? The argument against it is we made a commitment to these folks that if they developed in solar, we would give them this subsidy. They've done their part, they invested in it, and therefore we have some moral, if not legal responsibility not to reduce the program. The counter argument, the one I'm more comfortable with, is these are sophisticated businessmen. They knew what they were getting into. When you develop a project based on a government subsidy, you should understand the risk that that subsidy will be adjusted going forward. This is what we have, a democratic government, and if a democratically elected government decides to tweak a program and change the subsidy, that is something you should have built in. When you build a new home or a new business and you are relying on the property tax estimates from the town hall and factoring into your numbers, you don't have a right to say to the town government, but I invested in this town based on the property taxes and now you've gone ahead and raised them. That isn't fair. That's not the way government and business interact. And so I think what we should do is review the program, have the Public Utilities Commission review the program. They have the resources to study it. And if I'm right, that the subsidy can come down, but they can still make a reasonable profit, then we ought to do that and reduce that subsidy and reduce that $220 million. But it's complicated and it's controversial because the solar industry is a very effective lobbyist in Augusta. They are very good at representing their interests, and nothing wrong with that. You in the business world know you need strong advocates in front of the legislature, and they are very strong, and they want that subsidy to stay just where it is. The solar lobbyists are here to save us from fossil fuel, and there is no tax subsidy or ratepayer subsidy that is too large given what they are trying to do for all of us. So you get the sense of what we're dealing with in Augusta, and hopefully you understand what it's costing you. Right now, the average residential ratepayer of Central Maine Power Company is paying every month $6.11 just for this program. Every single month, that bill. And you think about the hundreds of thousands of ratepayers who are paying that $6 every month for 12 months a year, and you get the idea of how big this is. And we're still, that $6.11 is going to grow to more like 10 cents when the program is finally maxed out. It is a huge cost, one that I don't think we need or should pay to these solar projects. I'll stop there, and if there's questions before I go to the next topic, I'm happy to move on. Yes?
Shelley Rudnicki, I'm state rep from Fairfield, and I've heard a lot of this, so I have a couple questions for you, just more for informational than anything. So you mentioned 5 megahertz, 20 acres does the 5 megawatts. Is that 5 megawatts based on, like with the dams, if it goes over a certain level, it becomes brown energy? And is that why and that's what's causing and driving up the price on that end, because we have to buy solar before we can buy the dam energy now. So if you can clarify that for me specifically, because that's where I'm saying we went from about 5 cents a kilowatt hour about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
To now we're over 20 cents a kilowatt hour, and we have to buy that 20-cent kilowatt hour before we can buy the energy from even dams. Am I?
First of all, thank you for your service in Augusta. We really appreciate it. Let me just say, I work with legislators every day, and I don't always agree with every single one of them. I'm sure you don't agree with every single one of them, but they deserve our thanks and credit. They put in incredibly long hours. The hearings go on into the evening. You hear endless testimony, much of it repetitive, which is hard. And then you turn around and you put a very difficult question like net energy billing in front of them and say, you have to vote yes or no right now. You don't have any more time. The vote is right now. We expect a lot out of them. So let me come back to your question, but thank you for your service. The 5 megawatts, it was an arbitrary number to keep the program somewhat in check. Obviously, if we had allowed 10 megawatts, my $220 million would be through the roof. So it's an arbitrary number. But yes, your basic premise is right. The way the net energy billing works is CMP must buy every kilowatt hour that comes out of those projects. They are at the front of the line. They get they buy it whether we need it or not. Now, what's weird is CMP isn't in the energy business. CMP is in the delivery business. Why is CMP even involved in this discussion about solar power? We got them 20 years ago out of the supply business. They're just in the delivery. The answer is it's one more hidden subsidy for the solar industry. And it involves, as many of you know, when you go to finance your business, one of the things that the investors, the banks, the lenders look at when you're financing a project is how stable and how reliable is the revenue stream that you're predicting will come from this investment. And when the solar developer goes to the bank and says, we're going to build this 5 megawatt solar project in Waterville, and we expect a certain amount of revenue, the bank and the investors are going to say, prove it. They then come to the PUC and say, can you help us by giving us a stable revenue? And they say, I've got an idea. Let's put CMP as the buyer. And CMP, we all know, is very stable. They're big, they've got deep pockets, they got a lot of money, and they're not going anywhere. So CMP becomes the purchaser of this electricity. What does CMP do with the electricity that they're buying for 20 cents? They're not supposed to have it. So what do? They turn around, and the moment they receive it, they dump it into the market, the wholesale market. And what they're doing is they're buying it for 20 cents. The wholesale market in New England fluctuates by a lot of factors, including the cost of natural gas. And it's roughly, call it, the average price in New England is like 6 cents. So they're buying it for 20 cents, turning around that moment it arrives and dumping it in at 6 cents. All of you in business will know quickly that is a recipe for going out of business. If you're buying high and selling low, you're probably not going to be in business very long. And that's exactly what CMP is doing here. They're buying power for 20 cents, reselling it for 6 cents, and that 14-cent loss shows up on my bill and your bill every month. Yes?
Why is that okay?
That's a great question. I wish I had put it exact. That's what I have said to the legislature in the last year or two, and what many AARP and other and the chamber and other people have said. It is justified because climate change is the highest moral imperative of our time, and we have to get off of fossil fuel as quickly and as fast as we can. And if we over-subsidize wind and solar, it's sort of one of the things that we put up with, because if you sat in one of those coastal towns that got hammered in January, you might not be asking the question of why we're over-subsidizing wind and solar. But I don't know that's a good answer to a great question.
But if I were to go to a bank and manipulate language and money like that, they'd throw me out the door.
Well,
And the lobbyists as well. I mean, the main people, the 100,000 of us, we're lobbyists, right, in a sense. And yet, these people that you talk about, that go, I think we're more than what's in there. Why does legislature and Senate listen to them? There has to be money somewhere going on.
There's a lot of money, yes. There's a lot of people making a lot of money. If you think about that, difference between it costs 10 cents to produce it, but they're getting paid 20 cents, that money, and sadly, a lot of that money is going to out-of-state investors and owners. When Goldman Sachs shows up in the state of Maine and says, I want in on net energy billing, that ought to be a red flag to all of us. And I got nothing against Goldman Sachs. They're making boatloads of money down on Wall Street, and God bless them. But when they show up in Maine and they want in on net energy billing, you know something. Those people are smart people. They know how to make money, and they know where there's an opportunity, and they saw an opportunity when the legislature spoke in 2019, and they are here. So what can we do about it is a great question. And one of the things to do about it is for more and more people like you to stand up and say to their legislators, I want this addressed. I want this changed. I'll tell you very frankly, one of the problems that's the struggle with is the Maine Chamber of Commerce. The renewable energy have a seat at the table at the Maine Chamber of Commerce, which they should. There's nothing, they're part of the business community. It makes it very difficult for the Chamber of Commerce to come out strongly opposed to programs like this, which have so much direct benefit to a group of their membership. So you can see it is about money, it is about power, it is complicated. Yes?
Has it been discussed with this program regarding how much of the solar panels are being produced in China, which is 78% of all solar panels being produced come from China, less than 2% from the United States. So when we want to follow the money, we can follow it straight to Beijing as well. There's a whole other conversation we had for a later time, not today, about all the problems that are wrong with that. Has there been any discussion about making it a requirement for at least a certain percentage of these panels to be at least produced here in the United States as opposed to funding a foreign machine?
Yeah, good question. It hasn't been a conversation in Augusta, but I know in Washington it is. And many of the, remember, we're just talking about one subsidy these people get. I'm just talking about the net energy billing because that's the ratepayer subsidy, and I'm the ratepayer advocate. There are massive tax subsidies built into our tax code for these people. But in many cases, the work coming out of the Biden administration does require a certain amount of the equipment and resources to be built here, and more is being done to move that onshore. But it is an important, but I want to be clear about one more thing. My office is not opposed to solar and wind and renewable energy. We have been accused, as I make these conversations and I do this work, of being in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry. It's frustrating for me when I hear that. We want more wind and solar. Let me say that again. The Office of Public Advocate wants more wind and solar. We just don't want to overpay for it. And whether the solar panels are built in China or the US is above my pay grade. But it's important to note that there are other people benefiting from this program in many different indirect ways. Yes?
So taking into account the large cost of, what this added electricity or alternative energy sources are going to cost us long term, does that really take into account the added upgrades that we're going to have to, do to the infrastructure as well, or is that not even thought about yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. That isn't part of my $220 million. The question is, how much does it cost CMP in terms of making changes to their infrastructure to accommodate all these solar? In the old days, when we would think about generating electricity, these were large, big generating stations running on oil, gas, coal, like Maine Yankee and Wyman 4, and they were connected at a very high voltage to the grid. They weren't in your backyard or my backyard or your neighborhood or my neighborhood. Now, with net energy billing, we have these small generating sprinkled around as you drive up and down the interstate. You see them at the interchanges. Those are net energy billing projects. It has created havoc for the CMP engineers to try and figure out how to accommodate them. The way to think about this is it's like water. In the old days, electricity flowed in one direction. We had these large central station generating. Think of them as factories. That's where the electricity was made, and it went out on the wire to your home and my home and businesses in one direction. What we're now asking CMP and Versant Power to do is change that whole way of thinking so that if I put solar panels in my neighborhood and I generate more electricity than I need and my neighbors need, I want that surplus energy to go back the other way to some other customer that may need it. And so we need a two-way system, because the whole premise of net energy billing is there's a lot of surplus energy that isn't being used in that neighborhood. Believe me, at the interchange in the interstate, there aren't a lot of homes and businesses right there, so it's all going into the system, and it's got to go fight back upstream to find a business or home where it can serve. So it is another cost of this program that is not directly related to this particular subsidy, but it's part of this change of bringing more generation into the communities rather than having large factory-like generators located in industrial parks. Yes?
So what you're saying with this $4 billion loss, or this, not tax, I guess, our CMP rates and Mercer rates are gonna continue to increase probably for the next 20 years.
Well, yes. Once the program has a life, and it's about 2/3 of the way through the life. So at the end of 2 years, we'll know exactly how many of these developers took advantage of it. Right now, there are still hundreds of projects that are in various stages of development. Once we get the exact number and we know how many hours of the day of the year the sun shines, we can make an estimate of how many kilowatt hours they will generate, and the formula will then kick in. Whether the formula continues to go up will be driven by things like inflation, but the the 220 million a year that I've said, that my estimate is when the dust settles is 220 million a year, should become relatively stable over the 20 years.
So you're estimating 220 million, it could be more.
It could be, and as the solar lobbyists say, I might be high. I don't think I am. We've done a lot of work on this, but yes, it's what I call it an informed estimate. And no one that I'm aware of has come up with an alternative estimate, and I've challenged the solar lobby. If I'm wrong in that estimate, if I'm alarming people like you about something that isn't really a problem, please show me what the right number is. And of course, they aren't interested in putting forward an alternative number, because I suspect they know if I'm wrong, it's by a relatively small amount. Yes. Have you got a technical problem?
No.
Oh.
I was going to say, you mentioned before about climate change and morality for being able to help with the climate change. But on the other part, it's not very moral for us, the consumer, to have to pay to help that. That's not moral at all. And for it to keep going up and up and up, number one. Number two, from my understanding, anything that's 5 megawatts or less that's put into a town is not able to be taxed by the town.
Yes, there is an issue about the property tax, and I think that's being changed. I think the legislature has changed that, but there's another hidden subsidy that at least was there for a while. This is part of the frustration with this industry. They're really good about convincing local, regional, state, and federal agencies and legislatures to give them more and more help.
So just real quick on that note, so if I put a solar panel system in my backyard, put a battery system, completely disconnect myself from CMP, I'm pretty sure my town's gonna come back and tax me for that.
Yes.
So either way, somebody's making money off from me for providing electricity in my home. That's not right. And at high cost.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you. Yes. Yeah.
With regards to energy sources, hydro, nuclear are all much better than fossil fuels. Why is that not being considered? I mean, there's been a lot of technological safety advances in nuclear. We've got access to hydro coming out of Canada. Why are those being diminished for solar and wind?
Yeah, good question. I keep talking about solar. Technically, the net energy billing program is available for any renewable, solar, wind, and hydro. But as a practical matter, it's solar, because that's what can fit under the 5 megawatts. So your question is, where do we look as we want to get off fossil fuel? Let's assume that we're done with, where the days of fossil fuel are diminished. Where do we look? Obviously, wind and solar are important, but your question is, what about hydro and nuclear? First of all, wind is a very important part, and offshore wind, you've read about it. We're working hard on it in Augusta. If we can figure out how to harness all of that wind out in the Gulf of Maine, we can do a lot to get ourselves off of oil and gas. So that's an important piece. That's not have anything to do with net energy billing. The nuclear question is an interesting question. A lot of smart people are looking at it. They've started trying some new projects. There was one in South Carolina. The cost overruns were huge. So the cost is a problem. We may be able to get smaller nuclear down to a reasonable cost. My question when this comes up is, are the people of Maine ready for nuclear power? We had a long, fractured relationship with Maine Yankee. Some of you will remember it went out to referendum, I think, 3 different times. The nuclear waste problem was a challenge. 3 Mile Island got people upset. Chernobyl, God, if you've watched that movie, it's chilling. I don't know whether the people of Maine are ready to go back to nuclear power. I spent the early years of my career working with Maine Yankee. Maine Yankee was the engine that kept Maine going for many years. The electricity was incredibly cheap, and it kept the paper industry and some of our large energy users in business longer than they would have been had we not had Maine Yankee. But in the end, it became the cost of maintaining and upkeeping it and staying up to date with the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulations, became increasingly expensive, and the owners decided it was the time to shut it down. In hindsight, maybe that was a mistake. We'll never know for sure. But I'm not sure the people of Maine, and I'm interested in how you feel about it. Would you want a nuclear power plant within 10 or 15 miles of Waterville? There's one, yes. I suspect some of you would say I'm not so sure. Yeah.
So with the coined term, climate change or environmental protection, does it seem really sustainable to alter 20 acres of land for a lot of these solar fields where, we're still inherently damaging the environment? How is that sustainable long term?
Well, I think the question is, what are the alternative uses of that land? And there's a lot of pieces that come into that. One is the agriculture community is very concerned about the solar developers coming in and buying up land that could be used for farming and agriculture. And they're exploring ways, can you get certain livestock to graze underneath the solar panels? Can you grow blueberries underneath the solar panels? So some work is being done on that. It's beyond my pay grade to figure out what is the best use of our open space and our land resources. To me, if solar works in the local zoning and in the community, that's fine with me if they put it on a particular parcel of land. But I do think there are people paying attention, and we do need to think about where we site these projects and where we want them. And one of the questions that's one of the problems with net energy billing is there's no consideration of whether these projects are sited in a way that CMP can easily accommodate and pick up the power and deliver it. To oversimplify it, when the program went into effect in 2019 and the developers came rushing into Maine, guess what happened? They were looking for cheap land, because we need 20 acres, and they were looking for land near CMP substations. So they all ended up in the same neighborhood, quickly taking options on land. Guess what happened? CMP said, we can accommodate you and maybe you, but you, and you, we can't accommodate unless we have multi-million-dollar investment in upgrading our system. And so we had this big problem, and still an ongoing problem, of what we call the interconnection delays. These projects are all lined up in a queue, and they're trying to figure out how much it's going to cost CMP to upgrade the system to accommodate them. And some of them will go by the wayside. Some of the projects will never be built because the cost of upgrading the CMP is simply too large for them to absorb. But it is a real problem in terms of why can't we come up with a program that cites these projects where they do the most good and where we can accommodate them for the lowest price. I want to move on to one other issue because I can see you need to go on to your business. This is not the only issue that we're struggling with in right now. And I want to talk about one other issue, and that is the competitive electricity providers. 25 years ago, we threw CMP and Versant Power out of the supply business. We said we think that having market and competition and choice will end up being better than having a monopoly provider regulated by a government agency. We have, for 120 years, we have had this model where we have certain businesses called public utilities that are monopolies. They have no competition, they have a geographic service area, and they are the only provider in that area. And the deal is, if they want to raise their prices, they need to come to the state government, to the Public Utilities Commission, and justify that price increase. And if the PUC doesn't think it's reasonable, then the price increase doesn't go into effect. And that was the regulatory bargain. And what we said in 2000 is, let's try competition on the generation side. What we also said was, let the retail marketers market the electricity to you and me as consumers. And so we created this little cottage industry called the CEPs. And you've seen the flyers in your mailbox. So maybe some of them have come and knocked on your door. Maybe they've called you on your phone. They are marketing to you and trying to tell you, you can stay on standard offer, which is the default service, where the PUC has set the supply price based on a competitive bidding process with some suppliers, or you can become a CEP customer. About 10% of Mainers have elected to become CEP customers. They have decided that they can do better than the standard offer. The tragedy is the results show just the opposite. We have done some analysis in our office, and we're doing a lot more analysis that you'll be hearing from. Over the last 7 years, those people who accepted the CEP have paid $80 million more, $80 million over 7 years, than if they had stayed on standard offer. So what is going on here? As you say, why is this okay? What is happening? We have adopted this sense that competition, markets, and choice will take care of the problem, and government will just look the other way. And it's time to stop. We need to rethink this. This is not okay, because what's happening is these CEPs are using aggressive marketing tactics for the most vulnerable customers. We know this. There's a company called Electricity Maine that you may have read about. They are the poster child for what's wrong with this. And I want to be clear, there are some good companies in this that are doing this CEP. C.N. Brown out of South Paris is one that does a good job and tries to do the right thing. Unfortunately, like in so many programs, it's a couple of bad apples that are really spoiling the whole barrel. And Electricity Maine is right up there. Electricity Maine was charging it still is actually, 39 cents a kilowatt hour. 39 cents a kilowatt hour. That's just the supply side. You've still got to pay CMP another 10 or 11 cents to deliver the stuff. And you're thinking, oh my God, the standard offer rate was 17 cents last year. Now it's 11 cents. What is going on? Why would someone be paying why would someone be charging 39 cents? Why would someone be paying it? And this is the problem. These unscrupulous CEPs are taking advantage. And what they're taking advantage, sadly, is our lower income people. We're finding more and more examples of low income people who are being preyed on. And if you're desperate to keep your household budget and to keep your lights on and to keep the electricity going, and someone knocks on your door and says, I can lower your electricity bill, sign here. And in many cases, most cases, the electricity bill goes down. They can beat the standard offer for a few months. And so they get a break. And they're seeing a modest decline. But then very quickly, when they take their eye off the ball, the price goes up to standard offer, and it goes above standard offer, and it goes way above standard offer. And we can't expect most of these people to pay attention to that. And this is the problem. We need the legislature to act to really regulate this process, or just say, you know what, retail choice, this isn't really working. The electricity that CEPs will sell you doesn't make these lights shine any brighter. It doesn't make your dinner cook any faster. It's the same kilowatt hours. They're getting it out of the wholesale market just the way the standard offer default service is. So it's not like buying, a new suit or a pair of shoes where you like the color or you like the texture or you think it's a better quality. This is just kilowatt hours. All we're talking about is price. And it doesn't take a business person very long to figure out there's no way this industry can consistently beat standard offer, because they buy the product from the same place and they have to do the marketing on top of that. The only way they do that is by luring people in with a teaser rate to get them started, and then once they think they're taking their eye off the ball, they start ratcheting up that price until it's well above standard offer, and they hope that most people don't look at the bill. So the one thing I urge all of you and your family and your friends and your neighbors, look at your CMP bill, look at the supply page. If you are a CEP customer, make sure you're not paying more than standard offer. Right now it's 11 cents. It's going to be 11 cents until December 31st. We're hoping it might go down on January 1st next year. But for the next 7 months, don't pay more than 11 cents for your supply. And if you are a CEP customer and you do see that you're paying more than 11 cents, pick up the phone and tell CMP, I want to go back on standard offer right now. That's your right. You have a right to go back on standard offer whenever you want, no matter what these unscrupulous providers say. And we've caught them in many cases, particularly Electricity Maine, saying, well, it's going to take us several months to process your back, and so we're going to get several more months of 39 cents a kilowatt hour until we can process you back to the standard offer. So please watch this. It is just tragic when they call our office, and we have people almost literally in tears calling our office saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't keep up. My CMP bill has gone through the roof. I don't understand why. It's just, we can't afford it anymore. What can you do? And the first thing our consumer advisor says is, look at your bill on page 3 and tell me what it says under supply. And too often it will say Electricity Maine or another supplier, and we'll say, there's your first problem. Get off of that and go back to standard offer. You will lower your electricity bill substantially. So that is an important piece to remember. I'm happy to take questions on the supply and the CEP, and I don't know whether any of you have had any of those kinds of experiences. As I say, most of Mainers are just stick with the standard offer because it's kind of easy and you don't have to do anything. And the savings that you will get by doing the CEP, if you really have to pay attention and be able to jump in and out depending on the price on any given month, you will save a couple of cups of coffee a week if you want to work at it, and some people enjoy it. It's kind of a fun game to see if you can beat the system, but for too many people, it is just a tragedy, and we are paying $80 million a year, $80 million over 7 years. That's over $10 million a year toward this for no good reason. There is no good reason to pay a penny more than the standard offer price for the supply. I have just a couple of minutes. We're coming in on the final 5 minutes. I'll go quickly to my third, and that is the storm costs. In simple terms, what Mother Nature is come up with in response to global warming and climate change is it is damaging the state in many ways, but in particular, it is damaging CMP and Versant Power. They are experiencing huge cost from the severity and frequency of major storms. You've probably seen, some of you who are commuting up and down the Turnpike and 95 have seen an endless supply of bucket trucks with out-of-state plates after the storms. Wonder what's going on there. What's going on there is huge costs that end up in your bill and my bill. In the past, CMP's cost of restoring service would run maybe $25 million a year. Still a large number because it's very expensive to bring those crews in. It has been exploding. Over the last 5 years, we are now up to almost $200 million. $200 million a year just in storm restoration. That's not the CMP employees. That's the additional cost to bringing in all these crews to get the trees out of the way and get the poles and wires. We project that in a few years, it's going to be, if nothing's done, it's going to be around $250 million a year for storm restoration. That is a huge cost for CMP ratepayers. And in my judgment, CMP isn't doing enough about the problem. We have been after them to better manage this system. When we ask them how do they decide how many crews to order in advance of a particular storm, we get a vague answer about as many as we can, as many as we need, as many as we want. It's not sound business management. They have a plan for storm restoration that they put in some thought. It's filed with the Maine Public Utilities Commission. We ask them, why don't you follow the plan? The plan tells you if the Gray Weather Service, NOAA, says this is a Category 3 storm coming into Maine next Tuesday, that tells them what additional costs they should incur to get ready for the storm. And their answer is, well, we don't really have to comply with the plan. That was just a plan. I mean, we're going to do what we need to do. And their attitude is, with some understanding that we aren't going to leave a CMP ratepayer in the dark for one more hour if we can possibly avoid it, no matter what the cost. My response, the Office of Public Advocate response, is unacceptable. We have to have a thoughtful balance between cost and reliability. And that's what we're not getting. And the second part of it is we need them to do a better job of preventing this in the first place. Tree trimming is a big part of this. The limbs fall onto the lines and the lines are now out of service, and it takes someone in a bucket truck to go out there and restore the service. They trim the trees on their right-of-way every 6 years. They used to do it every 5 years, but it became expensive and it was hard to find arborists to come in and do that. So they said, well, we'll do it every 6 years. Well, guess what? The tree branches grow every year, whether they trim them or not, and we can show that a typical branch, given 6 years, is now hanging over the wire waiting for the next storm. It's time for them to spend more money, and I understand that's going to cost you and I more in our bills, but they need to do a better job of what we call hardening the grid, preparing us so we don't have the inconvenience of having no power. God knows, the first couple of hours, as I always say, are kind of romantic with your spouse. You light the candle and you got a bottle of wine out and you say, there's no TV, no phone, there's nothing else. Let's just, spend a few minutes. But after 3 or 4 hours, that starts to get old. And on the second day, it starts to get really old. And by the third day, you're calling CMP all sorts of unkind names. So that part we need to do a better job of getting on top of, and we can save ourselves some of the $200 million of storm restoration. A few less of these crews coming into Maine after each storm would be much better for my CMP and your CMP bill. I see my time is up. I'm happy to stay around for a few minutes and chat with you. Thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate the questions and your attendance. Thank you.